All right, my name is Anabel Berresford. I'm a young at heart, 90-year-old person, almost. And I was born in New Brighton. And then at 2 years of age, we moved to Dougherty Township. And I've lived here ever since. I quit the bottle at 2 years of age and never got back on the bottle again. And I've got the 90th birthday coming up, so that's pretty good. So I met Ken when I worked at Freedom Oil. And he was the highlight of my life. But he came back from the service. He'd served in India. And he came back to work at Freedom Oil. Well, we were in the midst of a bowling season. It was in January, I don't know what year now, probably 46 or 7. And one day I walked into the bowling alley. It was in Beaver, which they really did have a bowling alley in Beaver called the Peak and Tom. And that's where Freedom Oil had their leg, the plant and the office. And I walked in, and here's this good-looking guy in a Air Force jacket with a fur collar and a little mustache. Oh my, was he delicious. And I said hi. And every week I came in, I said hi to him. That's all. And then one night, they had asked me to sing at a Presbyterian Women's Association meeting. I think it was in Butler or maybe Newcastle. I don't remember which. And these people from the Beaver Church came with all these books that the lady wanted me to sing out of. And so after bowling, my friend Marcy Busini and her boyfriend Bud Reed, we were standing on the corner across from the bowling alley waiting for the bus. We were going to Rochester. And Ken pulls up in his little car and asked us if we wanted to ride. So we did. We crawled in. And I was in the front seat with him. Well, when we got to Rochester, Marcy said to Ken, Anabel lives out by somebody else. Which the poor guy, he had to take me home. So he drove me home. And when he left, I said, watch out for the pole at the end of the driveway. And so I gave him a week to call me because I thought we got along pretty good. He didn't call. Gave him 2 weeks to call. He didn't call. Gave him 3 weeks to call, and he did call. But here he was going steady with another girl, and he had to dump her first. Which I found out later, of course. Oh, then we went together 11 months before we got married. It all happened very quickly. So when you meet the right one, grab them quick. So I don't know what... The first gift he ever gave me, Dad liked to hunt. He hunted groundhogs. He brought me a groundhog tail. That was my first present from him.
It's very romantic.
He wrapped adhesive tape around the stump of it, and it was in a brown manila envelope. My first gift. After that, he bought me a pair of bowling shoes. I think to make up for the tail. But anyway.
So what year was it when you guys...
What, honey?
What year was it when you guys got married?
We got married in 48. 48, we went to the preacher's house and got married. Almost went to the wrong house. They had a bunch of kids, the preacher, and the house next door had a lot of milk bottles out on the porch, and we thought, and these houses were exactly alike. And we started up the steps, and Reverend Spots came out on the porch in his long-tailed coat and said, "I think you're at the wrong house." So we went into the right house, and we're married in his living room. And then we went to my house. No, first we went to Ken's house, Grandma and Grandpa Berresford's, and saw them. And they took pictures, of course. And then we went to my house. Oh, and your dad picked up his clothes. They were in a paper bag. Paper bag. He didn't have a suitcase. And I thought I should have got him a suitcase for Christmas last year because I didn't know what to get him. And then we went to my house, and my dad had just come home from the hospital that day, and he was laying on the daybed in the dining room. And he said to us, "Don't fight." That's what he said, "Don't fight." And we never did. Well, not never. We did have some little spats, but not much. And so then we picked up my clothes and we headed for Cook's Forest. We got out in New Swickly Township, and I had forgotten my jackets. So we turned around in this farmer's driveway and headed back home. And ever after that, when we passed that spot, we'd say, "Honeymoon turnaround." So then we went back home, picked up my jackets. Well, my brother Bill was 11 years old at the time. And he said to me, "When am I going to be an uncle?" We were on our honeymoon.
He was pushing things.
Well, we made him an uncle 5 times. But anyway, then we got started and went up to Cook's Forest and had our honeymoon up there. And it was cold up there. It was snowy and but we had a good time, naturally.
We don't need details on that.
Oh, we bought a pair of lamps up there while we were there. I think in Clearfield. That we saw them in a window and I liked them, and so we bought them. They're my vanity lamps right now. Mm-hmm. And so I still have them all these years later. Like I said, we had 5 kiddos. I'm very proud of my family. All good people. And they get along fine. But every time I had a new baby, Ken would say to me, "They're not mine. They don't have a mustache." If he could see us now, every one of us have a mustache, even the girls.
Don't tell our secrets.
Yeah. But anyway, that's as far as I can think of things right now.
So tell us about Grandma and Grandpa.
Grandma and Grandpa, they were good parents. Strict but good. And I had a happy childhood. Not much to talk about there, though. Although one Christmas when I was a teenager, I decided it would be best to buy my own things so I'd get what I wanted for Christmas. So they gave me the money, which wasn't all that much. And I bought a pretty slip and a compact, which I still have. Worst Christmas I ever had. It's better to have surprises. So I do remember that about being a kid. Other than that, I don't. I like to cut grass. And even when I worked, before I was married, on Saturdays I would cut grass. And it was a push mower, it wasn't electric. And, or gasoline. And I did like to do that. Other than that, I think my life really began when I met my husband. So, okay, let's talk about Dad. He worked at Freedom Oil. He went into service when he was still working there. So when he got out of the service, of course his job was there. They had to keep their jobs for them during the war. And I think they gave him a watch when he went into service.
Huh.
And then he came back and he worked there for a while. Well, we were married, and he decided to try to find another job closer to home, really. And he went down to North Rochester, and he got a job down there, and I can't remember the name of the place. Impervious Varnish it was at the time. And while he was there, it must have changed 3 or 4, 5 different times. Somebody kept buying it. It's Valspar now. And so he was working down there. Well, to get that job down there, he had to take a cut in pay, 10 cents an hour. He was making less money than at Freedom. But at Freedom, there was no chance of advancement. All the operators in the stills where he worked were younger men, and they were going to be there for years. So Dad looked for another job, and he went down to Impervious Varnish, and they hired him. But like I said, 10 cents an hour cheaper. But he was, and that was very brave of him, because we were expecting Bob at the time. And so we were living in the cellar, expecting the second child, and he changed jobs. But he got that 10 cents back in a month. In a month, they gave him that 10 cents, and we were right back where we started from, and he was closer to home. And look how he rose from working in the department that he started in, and he worked shifts. And then I think it was about a year or so, they raised him to a foreman. And of course that was another increase in wage. Then in a number of years, and I don't remember how many, he got to be general foreman of the plant, or of the whole plant. And of course that was a raise. And then he was all on daylight. But when he worked shifts, he liked 4 to 12 the best. He could work here in the morning and then go to work in the afternoon. That's one thing we like to do, is work. And he enjoyed working. Now, I didn't know Dad when he was in the service. He was discharged by the time I met him. But he tells a story about when he worked for Curtis LeMay, General Curtis LeMay. And I think that was the general in charge of dropping that bomb on Hiroshima. But anyway, other guys in his department, Dad worked in the office, and other guys in his department had got a raise and a step up with stripes on their shoulders or wherever they put them, on their arm. And he hadn't got a raise. So Dad went on strike. Now you don't do that in the military, but he did. And he refused to work, and he had his feet up on the desk, crossed on the desk, and the general went through, and he said he just grinned at him. He didn't say a word. Dad got his raise, and he got more stripes. I think when he was discharged, he was a technical sergeant. I think that's what he was. And he got some medals. I think it was a Bronze Star he got. It's around here somewhere.
Tell us, when you were a kid, what kind of games you played or what you did when you were a kid.
Well, in the winter we played Fox and the Geese.
What's that?
I don't remember. I know it was a circle and somebody was in the center, And I don't know, you ran around and they tried to catch you or something.
Maybe
But I remember Fox and the Geese, King of the Hill, and I don't know what that was all about either.
and
I know we used to go for rides in the country. My dad had a Model T Ford, and we'd all get in there, and there were 4 of us kids. And we'd take a ride to Zoo, but we thought we'd gone a long, long way. And we'd go to the Isley store, and Dad would send Dot and I in to buy ice cream cones. And everybody get an ice cream cone. Then we'd come out and we'd sit in the car and we'd eat those ice cream cones. And then my dad would say, "That tastes like another one." And back in he'd send us and we'd get a second one.
really.
And they were only like 10 cents a cone at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But they were big. And I always got White House. That's vanilla ice cream with cherries in it. And but we thought we were a million miles away out there in Zeuxnople. Then on the other side of Zeuxnople, there was a spring. And the WPA had built a stone wall around the spring. I think it's still there. And we used to ride out there. And again, we thought we were a million miles from home. And we always had a fold-up cup. It folded up. Plastic cup. And everybody get a drink out of that spring. That was a big deal. Yeah. Dad always liked to find roads that were country roads, no traffic. And he'd found a hill, he'd go real fast down the hill, and it was like being on a roller coaster. At night, he'd see the fires from J&L in the sky because they lit up the sky. And he'd say, "There's a fire somewhere. Let's go find it." And away we'd go. He knew it was in Aliquippa. We thought it was big fun anyway. Then he'd pretend he got lost and travel around. He knew where he was going, but we didn't. We thought we were really lost. That's the kind of entertainment we had. We had no television. Well, we did have a radio. And Little Orphan Annie was on, and Jack somebody, the All-American Boy. Armstrong. Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy. And the Lone Ranger. And what's that song they play?
William Tell Overture.
The William Tell Overture. And anybody that listens to the William Tell Overture and doesn't think of the Lone Ranger is a real connoisseur of music. Well, what else should I talk about?
Well, we were on Grandpa, so can you tell us about the Depression, like about his work circumstance and stuff?
Well, Grandfather Horter was a glass man. He worked in a fried glass house. And he was what they call a blower. He blew air through this long tube and had a hunk of molten glass on the end, and it went into different shapes and things. Well, during the Depression, Fry went under, and Dad had no job. Actually, he had no regular job for 5 years. During that time, he did get a job in Chicago. And I forget what the company was that he went to work for out there. And so he had to travel, which left Mom at home with 4 kids and trying to take care of them, and Dad way out in Chicago. Well, before he'd gone out there, he started digging the cellar out under the house because there was no cellar. And he was digging it by hand. And so he had posts down there propping up the floor. and didn't one of those fall down. And we had a coal stove that heated the house. And Mom was afraid it would catch the house on fire. So I remember my uncle had to come out, and Uncle Frank, I think it was him, and put the post back under the floor so to keep the stove from falling over. During that time, Mom and Dad couldn't afford to get the license for the car, so my dad did a lot of walking. In fact, he walked clear to J&L in Aliquippa when he had heard that they might be hiring. He and my Uncle Frank walked clear to Aliquippa. They weren't hiring. And they walked back. That's kind of sad, you know?
Yeah, that's very sad.
And then they were going to shut off our electricity because they hadn't been able to pay the bill. So somehow my dad rigged up the electricity to the house. So actually we were stealing it. And
now that's on tape.
and so they found out about it, the Duquesne Light, and they come out, and I remember Mom taking us kids down the cellar and told us to be very quiet. And we never answered the door, so they cut off the electricity at the pole, so we didn't have any electricity. My dad worked out at Leonberg Dairy and did work for Mr. Leonberg to pay for the milk that for us kids. And then he got on to welfare and worked for the WPA making roads, which was very hard work. Mm-hmm. And so we got through it. I know my parents at one time were down to 50 cents. That's all they had was 50 cents. And they spent it for a bonnet for Aunt Dot. That's what they did. So they wallpapered rooms for $1 a room. And one person wanted them to use old wallpaper, and Mom said it was so hard because it kept crumbling and tearing, and they had a terrible time papering with that. But they had a rough time, but they got through it. And that's why I think we can manage money so well now. We learned the hard way.
Well, and didn't Grandpa actually start building your house as a garage, and then the Depression
Oh,
hit?
yes. Their house was supposed to be a garage. They were going to buy one of those Sears homes. And something happened between my mother and her father. Of course, we were living with them at the time in New Brighton, and they got into an argument about something, and she said to my dad, "Can you fix that garage up to live in?" And he said, "Well, I think so." She said, "Well, do it." And we moved into the garage. Well, as the years went by, Daddy kept adding on to the garage till now it's a house, and John Horter lives in it. But that's how it all started. My father hand dug everything. He dug out that cellar, his cistern, he hand dug that, and it was deep. But he said, and I was about 2, I'd go to the top of it and he'd be down there digging, and I'd say, "Here I come," and I'd jump right down in. And he said he had to drop the shovel and grab me. So I was about 2, I think, when we moved over there. And I lived there till I was married at 21. And now, as I say, John Horter lives there.
Now, when you got married to Dad, where did you move from there?
Oh, well, my grandparents, Majors, lived in New Brighton, on 7th Avenue, New Brighton. And they had a double garage with an apartment above it. Well, they were gone by then, and my mother had rented out the house as furnished rooms, except the first floor. It was unfurnished, 3 rooms and a bath. So we rented the 3 rooms and a bath over the garage, and that's where we went to housekeeping. And we were there for 4 years. We were living there when Gary was born. And then we bought this lot in 1950. And he started building in 52. He put the cellar in, and we moved into the cellar. And Gary was 18 months the day we moved in. And I was so tired that day, I said, I'm never moving again. And I'm still in the same house. Now I'm upstairs, I'm not downstairs, but
So you really meant it.
I really meant it. I wasn't moving again. And here at almost 90, I'm still in this house. And if it wasn't for my girls, I would have to be somewhere else because I could not take care of it. So my girls have been very good to me. It's like assisted living and Meals on Wheels in my own house. And that's about all that.
So how long were you in the house before Bob came along then?
We were in the cellar when Bob was born.
Okay.
We still lived in the cellar. When we moved upstairs, Bob was about 2. Because these are plastered walls. They are plaster. And they were snow white before they were painted. Bob got a red crayon. And where the refrigerator sits now, Bob scribbled all over the wall with red crayon. Made a good blackboard, I guess. But I thought it would never come off. Bob also carved his initials in the knotty pine paneling around the fireplace, too, when he was in kindergarten. And then Penny put the Roadrunners in the garage on the...
No, that wasn't... Well, I might have done one. But I think that was Bob and Dawn, I think.
Oh. She didn't own up to it, so it must have been Bob.
I wrote in lipstick on the back of the aqua chair.
Yes, you did. We had an aqua chair. It was a platform rocker. And Penny scribbled on the back with lipstick. These are all memories. At the time, they weren't. Well, it was a number of years before we could afford to go on a vacation. So we found this cottage up in New York State. I forget the name of the town we were in. And on the lake. And it was a guy from Beaver Falls that owned it. His name was Mr. Freed. And so I think that's what his name was, Mr. Freed. So anyway, we rented it, but we went with Shirley and Ken Householder the first year because we couldn't afford to do it by ourselves, the rent. And then the next year, I think we went with, I don't know whether it was Porter's or Boswell's, one of them. The year we went with Boswell's, Jimmy got sick and Betty had to drive him home because he was so sick. Another year we went with Porter's and their kids, and we used so much bread that year. Every time we turned around, somebody was running to the store to buy a loaf of bread. And whenever they made toast and it got too brown, Bernie would eat it. She liked burnt toast. And one of the neighbors in the group where the cottage was had this big inner tube. And I think it was off an airplane or something. And the Porter boys It was down on the beach, and the Porter boys got a hold of that thing, and they were playing in the lake with it. Well, I think everybody ended up playing with it. The year Porters went with us, Penny was little. What were you, about 2?
I don't remember.
No, that was Jeannie and Donna. They weren't too old. The year Porters went with us, and Dad went to town and bought a handle that they put it lower on the screen door so Donna and Jeannie could come in and out the cottage. Imagine the guy that owned the place was really shocked when he saw that. But there was a neighbor who had this big Great Dane, and I forget that dog's name, but it would come over all the time and play with the kids. It was a real nice dog, but it looked ferocious, like Marmaduke. And even Donna and Jeannie, who were little, they weren't afraid of it. But every time we went to that cottage, we had to bring mouse traps. No, it wasn't mouse traps. It was ant traps. Ant traps we had to take. No hot water in that cottage. And when all the kids went down to the beach and they come back and they were all covered with sand and everything, Dad would make them ride in the trunk of the car with the lid open back to the cottage. He didn't want all that sand in the car. And Mom and Dad, they came up at least 1 year and stayed just a day. They didn't stay overnight. And Mom got her broom and she was sweeping the cobwebs off the outside of the cottage. That was what she did, grab a broom and start sweeping. And then 1 year, Grandma and Grandpa Berresford came up, and Grandpa Berresford, he fished a lot. Well, that day that they were there. They just stayed the 1 day too. So we had a good time. And then we bought ourselves a trailer. Well, the first year we rented a trailer. And Dad wanted to see if we could do 2 weeks and spend the same amount of money we had spent 1 week at the cottage. We lived on Kool-Aid and sandwiches. I still don't like lunch meat from the store. I just had too much. And, but everybody liked camping but me. So we bought a trailer. Dad and his friend went out to the show out at the Butler Airport, and they had a trailer show out there. And that's when they saw this trailer. And so we bought one, and his friend bought one. And from then on, we camped every year. I don't know what year that was. But all 5 kids went, and that's why we needed the type of trailer we did. It was called a convertible, because it slept 8, and we needed 7. So that worked out all right. But then as the kids got older, they would quit going camping with us. First year was Gary, then Bob, and every year Dad would feel very bad that that kid wasn't with us again. And he kept a log of all the camping. And you could tell by reading that log how sad he felt that the kids were growing up and leaving, you know. And so I guess I lost my train of thought here.
Well,
I'm 90.
See, he got sad about all of us leaving, so
Yeah, he did. But I was just about the time you got used to sleeping in the camper, it was time to come home. Because you were still cooking, you were still doing laundry because we'd go to a laundromat and I'd do laundry. So really, for me, it wasn't a vacation. I was still doing all the same things. I know the year we rented that one trailer, we were out in, where were we? Not Hershey, but out that way. And Donna got cut on the side of the door. They were racing in and out of it. Oh no, that was up in Butler. That was up in Butler. And we were at a campground there. And she got cut on the side of the door, and we had to take her to the emergency room and stitch her up. And we came home, and Dad had enough money left because he had to pay cash out there. I don't know. We had hospitalization, but evidently they didn't recognize it out there or something. But he had enough cash left that we stopped and got an ice cream cone or something at a custard stand on the way home. And Donna ended up, because we felt sorry, she had all these stitches and everything, we let her have a cat. From Aunt Dot's. Somebody dumped a cat off out there. It was a kitten. And it had pretty blue eyes, but it had a lot of fleas too. And she named it Tammy. Well, here Tammy was a boy. And we didn't find that out till about 6 months later when he ran off one time and came back with a torn ear. So that was when we found out it was a boy. Never liked cats. But we had Tammy. And we had him till he died. And
He was kind of mean.
Donna was happy with him for a while.
But he was kind of mean.
Yeah, he was mean. He bit me once. He liked to be petted when he wanted to be petted. And I was doing laundry one day, and I had been petting him between washers. And then I turned around and walked over to the wash machine again, and he bit me on the back of the leg. I don't like cats. And I don't think they like me either. We always had some kind of an animal around here, a dog or fish, or I think we had a lizard or something at one time too. Didn't Donna bring a lizard home from a circus or something she went to?
I don't know, but didn't you have a lamb at one time?
Oh, one time we had a lamb, yeah. We called her Angel. Uncle Eugene. It was a lamb that the mother rejected. And he brought it into us. And it was cute. It followed you around like a little dog. We didn't have it very long. And one day it was real nice, like today. It was about 60 out. And we let her out in the yard. She followed me down the mailbox, I remember that. And didn't she catch pneumonia and died? But Donna was little at the time because she used to sit on a chair and put her feet on the top of the box that we kept the lamb in and feed her a bottle. But I remember calling old Mr. Freshcorn. He had a farm, and I was telling him about the lamb, and what could I do for it? And he said, they're not worth anything, let her go.
Oh.
I thought, so cruel, so cruel. But I guess farmers are different than we are.
They see it all the time.
Yeah.
So you were talking about camping. Do you remember where was your favorite place we would go? I know you didn't like camping much, but...
We went up to Michigan a few times. I think the family liked that. I can't remember the name of the place.
Warren Dunes?
Warren Dunes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I
That's what
remember
it was. And they had big sand dunes, and I remember going. That's when I could go uphill, and we went up to the top of the worn dunes, and people would run down. And there was one guy went up with some kind of flying thing on him on his back.
The hang gliders.
Hang glider, yes. And he jumped off. But yeah, they liked Warren Dunes. I think that was a good place to go. I think we went there several times. And we went different places. Never got to Florida, though. We went to Georgia, but we never got to Florida. And far west is Michigan, I guess. Mackinac Island. And you kids saw a lot of things. We went to up north to the New England states. And I think Portland's where we stayed, and you met the little French kids up there, and they spoke French, but you guys played with them, Barbie dolls, and Donna made cookies, no baked cookies. She always took the ingredients with us, and then she'd make the cookies. And he brought the cookies out, and these little French kids who could not speak English were going, that was so good. But they didn't need to speak English, that they understood each other, and you all played together. And yeah. And Bob and Dad went out on a fishing boat and caught some fish in the ocean, and then we cooked it. Fish stinks, but we cooked it, and they really enjoyed that, going out there and spending the day fishing. And so we've been a lot of places in the trailer, put a lot of miles on it, loaned it out a couple times. Dowdy's borrowed it one year, and Uncle Bill's borrowed it one year, and then just before Dad died, we sold it. Well, the people bought it in New Brighton, but they didn't take it home. They left it here, and which kind of angered your father. He thought they should get it out of his yard, but they didn't come till about 3 weeks after he died and picked it up. But we had a lot of fun in the trailer, even though I wasn't crazy about camping. But I think kids got a good education from it, because I always tried to pick places that was a learning experience plus fun. And
Like what?
what
Like what?
learning?
Yeah.
Well, we went through the Welch's Grapefruit Factory in New York, I think it was, and they were canning little things of grape juice there. Where else did we go through that was a learning thing?
Kellogg's factory.
Oh, yes, the Kellogg's factory in Michigan and the Post factory. We ended up with 112 boxes of cereal, little boxes of cereal, and that year. Now, the Post factory, you didn't go through the plant. Just, they had a museum that you went through. Kellogg, you went through the complete factory. And then they fed you, I think it was the old colored one, Fruit Loops with ice cream. That was, you had ice cream with Fruit Loops on top. That's how it was. And when we were down in St. Louis, we went through the Budweiser factory. And there you got a beer at the end. And Aunt Helen had 2. And she didn't even like beer, but it was hot that day.
Oh, it was hot.
It was 115 in the place where they brewed the beer. Well, then where else did we go through a factory? I thought of it a minute ago, but I forgot.
I remember going through a pretzel factory once.
Oh, out in Pennsylvania, we went to a place that made their own pretzels.
Was that Berlin?
And they had Donna making a pretzel. It never got baked, but I mean, she made the thing. It hardened. But then someplace else we went through a factory, and
Well, I know we always.
Hershey. We went up to Hershey and went through the candy factory. At that time, you got to go through the factory. And we went through the factory. In later years, I went out and you got in a little cart, and it wasn't the factory that you went through. They had displays and and everything. So it's different now. But when you go to Hershey, it smells like chocolate all over town.
And we went to historical things. You know,
Yeah, we'd go to historical things, and so the kids learned a lot, I think, and they enjoyed camping. But it just got to be too much for Dad, and we had to get rid of the trailer. We got rid of it just in time, really. I think the last time we went, I think Penny and Karen Porter went with us. And we went up to New York, and then we went over into Canada. And stayed in a motel in Canada, and I think they all went swimming in the pool there. Yeah. That was the last time we went, but it was too hard for Daddy to try to set up the trailer anymore. I know Penny was very disappointed because she liked the camping. But she got over it.
I did.
And got married. So,
What do you remember about your wedding? As far as where'd you get your wedding dress?
oh, I don't know, someplace in Beaver Falls. It was just a kind of a cocktail dress. It was aqua. And it had a tail on it.
A tail?
Oh, well, I don't know what you said. It had a piece of material on the back. And it
Oh.
was supposed to be fancy.
Dramatic, huh?
But I had a hat made to match the dress. Only I got the hat the night before the wedding. I picked it up. And she didn't have the right netting for on the hat, and she put black netting with pink dots on it. I should have taken it off, but I didn't. Well, when we went to have our wedding pictures taken down at Grawley's, Bob, I forget what his last name was. He was a photographer down there. He said, "Oh, that hat." I never liked our wedding pictures after that.
Well, they were black and white, so you were okay.
Were they?
Nobody could tell they were pink dots,
Well,
so you were in good shape.
anyway, I wished I'd have ripped the netting off, but I didn't. And Dad wore his black suit with the stripes in it. That was his good suit. And every time he was in a wedding, because he was in many weddings as best man, he wore the same suit. He was pallbearer many, many times. He wore the same suit. And he called that suit his Marion and Berrien suit. And one day, he grew out of it. And we had to turn it into Goodwill. And he felt real bad about his Marion and Berrien suit he didn't fit into anymore. Dad wasn't much for buying clothes. I'd tell him there was a sale. No, he wasn't interested. But when he was interested in buying clothes, he didn't care what he paid for them. He just went and shopped and shopped. He liked, there used to be a store in New Brighton, and every year they'd have buy one, get one for $10. You bought a suit, you could get another one for $10. And he liked their sales. Or you could buy an overcoat and get another one, or whatever, you just $10 more. And he liked those sales. But with 5 kids, you see that they're dressed first, and then mom and dad are last. That's how it works. Oh. But I never regretted the size of our family or how they turned out. That's always been a blessing. All right. I was thinking about when I was younger. Oh, maybe first or second grade, maybe both times, really. And my grandmother lived down on 7th Avenue in New Brighton. This is my grandmother Major's. And 2 blocks down was a railroad siding. And every spring, the railroad siding was used by the circus. They would come to town and they would park their railroad cars down there. Now, the road that goes through the Junction stretch was not there at that time. So there was a place called Junction Park. And it had a racetrack, and it had a dance hall, and it had buildings where they had shops and things during the summer. Well, the circus would come to town, and so we would get down the night before and stay at my grandmother's overnight. She had feather ticks on her bed instead of mattresses like we do now. And when you laid on those, you sunk down in, they were so soft. And we would go down and stay overnight with grandmother. Then we'd get up in the mornings. And sometimes my parents would come to town and take us down to that railroad siding. It'd be real early in the morning and it'd be foggy. And we'd get down there and the circus was unloading from the trains. And big elephants came off. And down the street they took them, down 16th Street down to 3rd Avenue, and then down 3rd Avenue to the Junction. And that was a big thing, to see elephants in New Brighton. And that was a big day for us. And then, of course, then we went home. But sometimes we got to go to the circus, but most of the times we didn't, because it cost money. And my folks did not have money. And, but we never realized that we were poor. We kids never did. And even at Christmas time, my father built toys for us. He built a barn for the boys, and then he built a little kitchen cabinet for my sister and I. And we played with them for years. In fact, the kitchen cabinet's down in my cellar now. My girls played with it. And so even at Christmas time, we got stuff. And we appreciated that. There was no talk about my parents didn't have enough money. And I know we were on WPA, welfare. And my father worked on the WPA and helped build roads. He broke rock. He worked hard. He did. So then there's a story about my great-grandfather Majors. He lived in New Sewickley Township. And he sold his farm. He had a farm out there. And he sold the farm. And he split the money between his kids, with the understanding that he was to live with each of them so many months a year, because he didn't have a home anymore. And they had got the money for the farm. So that was, I don't know how long that had continued, but he had spent time down at my grandparents' this one time, and his time was up. And he was to go to his daughter Effie, and I don't know her last name. I don't have no idea. And she lived on Oak Hill in New Brighton. So my grandfather had taken him up there to Aunt Effie's, and he had his suitcase and his violin case because he played the violin. And so my grandfather left him off in front of the house and went on to work. Well, the poor old gentleman went up to the door, knocked, and his daughter would not let him in. She would not let him in, her own dad. And the poor old guy, he walked from Oak Hill, New Brighton, down to 7th Avenue and 16th Street to my grandparents again. Carried his suitcase and his violin case. And that night he cut his wrists. And he died. And the next morning, my mother, who would have been about 19 or 20, I would guess 19, went up to Aunt Effie's, and when she knocked at the door and Aunt Effie opened the door, and Mom slugged her. She slapped her so hard that her glasses flew off. My mother was feisty. Now I'm not, but she was.
Okay.
Now I've got 5 grandchildren, 9 grandchildren, and 3, not even a half, grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Yeah, one on the way, yeah.
One on the way. Yeah. So I'm very happy. I'm very contented. I've had a good life. I had great parents, great husband, great in-laws, great family. Not many people can say that. The Lord has blessed me.